Holy
On September the 11th, 2001, one of the worst terrorist attacks in history was taken out in America. 19 Al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorists pretended to be normal civilians on their flights, but instead they hijacked their planes and crashed them into many important American buildings. These include the Twin Towers in New York City, the Pentagon in Washington, D.C.
The building itself, literally the top of it came down, sending smoke and debris everywhere.
And a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Saw the smoke come up and the explosion shook the house.
These terrorists took advantage of lackluster security protocols, carrying deadly weapons onto their aircrafts and turning them into jet-fueled missiles. So how are air travel companies supposed to prevent something like this from happening again? How did air travel change because of these events? Before the events of 9/11, air travel was actually quite simple. Airport security was outsourced to private contractors and was much less stringent than TSA's current standards. In an article by Janet Bednarik, she says in the early decades of air travel, airport security beyond basic policing was essentially non-existent. Getting on a plane was no different than getting on a train or a bus. Airlines made good amount of revenue from having low security, as people would be more willing to frequent the airport and buy things from restaurants, stores, and other things of that nature. Now you may think these rules were fine for the time, as no major attack had proved them faulty yet, but that could not be further from the truth. On November 24th, 1971, a man named D.B. Cooper handed his flight attendant a note that read this: "Act like nothing is wrong. I have a bomb in my bag. If you don't meet my demands, I will blow this plane sky high. Yes, I know planes are already sky high. Don't laugh or I'll trigger the bomb. Now write a second note for the pilot," and showed her the bomb. This second note included demands of $200,000 in cash, on top of 2 front and back parachutes to make his getaway. The government scrambled to get this money and the parachutes, but once it was secured, Cooper told the pilots to fly low and slow so he wouldn't be sucked out of the plane the minute the door opened. Cooper told all flight personnel to get into the cockpit, and then the red light flashed indicating the emergency door opened in the cabin. It is assumed by many that he jumped out of the plane. However, whether or not he survived is still a mystery, as he has not been found to this day. One of the smartest, most intricate terrorist attacks was caused by how little security there was. But again, airlines were only really concerned with keeping security low and their revenue up. This turned out to be their biggest mistake in 2001. As stated before, 19 Al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorists brought deadly weapons on their flights, hijacking their aircrafts and crashing them into many important American symbols. The way they got past security with all these deadly weapons boils down to about 3 factors. At airport security checkpoints, even if they did detect small knives or cutting tools, they did not consider or deem these as threatening or harmful. The security system only scanned for dangerous weapons or tools, and not dangerous people. Although profiling someone based on looks is not always okay, there are many cases where this has stopped or prevented terrorist attacks. With the way the system was created, a suicide mission such as 9/11 had not even been taken into consideration. Commercial airlines had little to no cockpit reinforcement or protection from takeovers. This, combined with the fact that blades and knives were allowed, was a recipe for disaster. These members of Al-Qaeda used these loopholes to their advantage, hijacking and crashing their planes into the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and although the third plane hit a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, this was only due to the fact that the passengers had revolted. The target building was the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. There were many people involved in the attacks. However, the mastermind behind them was a man named Osama bin Laden. This man was an extremely intelligent terrorist who used bombings and bloodshed to continue the cause of jihad. After many other altercations with the US and other countries such as Pakistan, bin Laden used the fact that he was founder of Al-Qaeda and prepared an attack the US would have never been prepared for. The attacks of September the 11th, 2001. The days that followed were confusing, to say the least. All flights were canceled. Airports were emptied. Everybody was in shock and citizens didn't know who or what to believe. When were flights starting back up? Was 9/11 an inside job? What were they going to do to prevent something similar? There were too many questions and too little answers. All the government could do was act fast to restore confidence in the nation's security. And on November the 19th, 2001, the TSA, or Transportation and Aviation Security Act, was passed to try and combat another large-scale terrorist attack. The TSA immediately required screening conducted by federal officials, 100% checked baggage screening, expansion of the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, which allows pilots to carry firearms on board, and reinforced cockpit doors. Additional screening was another main focus, and many passengers were pre-screened and advanced screened at different security checkpoints. This led to the major issue, as stated before, of racial profiling and invasion of privacy, as many Middle Eastern-looking people were singled out for further screening. It is clear that the TSA was taking a step in the right direction. However, it was the terrorist attacks that happened after that shaped security into what it is today. To many surprise, the attacks of 9/11 did not do all too much to shape security into how it is today. For example, in late 2001, a man named Richard Reed, who was inspired by the attacks of 9/11, attempted to use matches to light explosives located in his shoes. This, on top of other sneaking suspicions of other attacks, is the reason shoes must be removed when flying. In December of 2002, the TSA deployed explosive detection systems nationwide to screen all bags for explosives. And a few months later, all trained flight personnel and pilots were allowed to carry firearms in the cockpit. Another big rule was put in place in August 2006 when terrorists attempted to take advantage of carry-on liquids and use them as explosives on at least 10 airliners flying from the UK to the US to Canada. This banned all liquids, gels, and aerosols over 3 ounces from carry-on luggage. Then, in 2009, a member of Al-Qaeda named Umar Abdulmuttalib attempted to use an improvised explosive device stored in none other than his underwear. This is the reason that more advanced scanners such as full-body scanners were put into place in all airports. In August 2014, they improved pat-down procedures, and in March of 2020, the 3-ounce liquid rule was lifted for up to 12-ounce hand sanitizer due to the COVID-19 virus. And that just about wraps up all the major and noticeable long-term changes that you yourself may observe when flying. There were many background changes and other minor improvements made, however, covering them all wouldn't be too much of a use because they are just so insignificant. With the new boundaries set since 2001, there are plenty of people who don't agree with them and prefer the old way of travel.
Back before 9/11, there was no such thing as a screening line.
However, I beg to differ. I believe these changes have been extremely beneficial to mine and others' safety. Yes, waiting in line is extremely annoying. And yes, all of the security measures are too. However, I believe that the positives of the extra precautions outweigh the negatives. I'd rather have to take my shoes off and take out all of my electronics every flight than to have to worry about my life being taken from me. Let's go back and review the most significant changes since 2001. The creation of the TSA, or Transportation Security Administration, passed by President Bush to oversee all major travel departments. Explosive detection systems were installed in all airports, meant to detect any sort of bombs or explosive devices that may be found in bags or luggage. The TSA requires all flyers to take their shoes off due to the attempted attack of the shoe bomber in 2001. The shoe bomber attempted to sneak explosives on his flight through his shoes. The 311 rule was put in place to prevent excess amounts of liquid from being carried on board. This was due to a terrorist plot to mix liquids that would cause an explosion. 3 stands for a max of 3.4 ounces per bottle, the 1 for a 1-quart resealable plastic bag, and the other 1 for 1 per person. Full body scans are an advanced way to screen human bodies, and it was put in place because a man named Umar Abdulmuttalib attempted to bring an explosive device on board his flight located in his underwear. In March of 2020, the 311 rule was lifted in a way, as up to 12-ounce bottles of hand sanitizer were allowed on carry-on, a significant jump from the 3.4-ounce maximum prior. And that leads us to today. It is commonly said that modern security is so well put together that the most dangerous part of flying is just driving to the airport. 9/11 and the many attacks that followed made an incredibly large impact on how we travel, and security will only continue to grow as many more loopholes are found.